Hey guys, this is New Sensei. In today's video, we'll be talking about a topic that has absolutely no educational value. Previously, I talked about using arrows as a melee weapon, and we concluded that yes, they could be used as a stabbing weapon if you really had to, but they didn't really confer any advantage. In some ways, you might be better off using something else, like your bare hands or even your bow. Well, speaking of that, let's talk about using the bow as a melee weapon. Now, to be fair, I've literally had nobody ask me about this topic, which I guess that's a good thing. I think archers have a lot of common sense, so you shoot things with the bow, you don't smack things with the bow. But nonetheless, the idea of using the bow as a close quarters weapon is prevalent in several pop culture sources, notably Hawkeye in the Avengers and the Arrow TV series. And we see often in those shows and movies where the character will have to use the bow as an improvised weapon. So the question today is, well, can that actually be done? Can you actually use a bow as a viable close combat melee weapon? Firstly, I want to go through the unstrung bow, because inherently an unstrung bow is a staff. This is more obvious when you're using a longbow. The longbow is really a straight stick which you bend back with a string. The recurve bows have much more pronounced shape, so when unstrung they still have this odd thing which makes it less suitable for close quarters combat. And of course there are other bows like horse bows which bend back on themselves, so they look nothing like a close combat weapon. But let's talk about this as a staff weapon. I'd say right away that the unstrung bow is a viable weapon. Like I said, it's a staff. And depending on the material, the composition, the density, the weight, it could be fiberglass, it could be wood, and how thick it is, then it may or may not actually hurt. But, as a staff, with some basic staff skills or polearm skills, you can actually do quite a bit of damage using this as a weapon. One interesting thing about using a bow is the shape of the grip will strongly influence the way you wield it. Now in this case, because this is a straight stave, then the grip's in the middle and I can actually hold it here, which gives me a bit more leverage when it comes to striking moves. You won't always hold it, you'll find that you might shift downwards or upwards because it is a staff weapon. But it does give the hand a natural place to grip. So I guess if you think about like really old-fashioned longbows, they won't have this feature, but a modern bow with a shaped grip will have more comfort of use if you have to use this as a close quarters weapon. So as a staff, this thing works just as well as most other staves. You can use it to lunge, you can strike with it, and all the directions come out quite easily, so it is basically just a staff weapon. You can use both ends, you can strike with the front end, follow through the rear, so you have the options there. You can block, you can parry, you can check, you can change sides, change stances. These things come very naturally, intuitively with the staff weapon. So as with most staves, very easy to use, quite flexible. No matter how much training you have, you can always make use of it and kind of do some damage regardless of your skill level. So as a general purpose long stick, this is fine. So was there any reason for an archer to use a bow in this manner? And the answer is no. Most bows weren't shaped like this. This was only for the long bows and flat bows. But even in those cases, there are much better alternatives which were more practical in combat. The English longbowmen, for example, would in fact carry the bow unstrung. They would keep the bows in their belts or in their hats and only string them when they were going to use them in battle. So they would be holding one of these, or it might be attached to their horse's satchel or something. But the English longbowmen did have other weapons. They had knives, they had swords, they had mallets. So if you were attacked in close quarters combat, you would probably ditch your bow and pull out your sword, or you pull out your dagger, or your knife, or your hammer. That makes a lot more sense than using a bow stave. I guess if for some reason you were holding the bow stave and you had to use it to fend off, I know, a ball or something, then you could. But apart from that, there was just simply no reason and no evidence that the bow stave was used as an actual weapon. Of course, we're not talking about unstrung bows. Our action heroes use their actual combat equipment ready for battle, ready for shooting as a melee weapon. And again, we see Hawkeye and especially Oliver Queen making liberal use of the bow as a melee weapon. So how viable is it? There are some immediate problems which I can see or feel with the bow as a melee weapon, and the first one is the balance. For most bows, and the model will dictate exactly where the balance is, but most bows have the weight centered in the riser or the grip. The limbs are very light, and this is the case for Hawkeye's bows and Arrow's bow in the first couple of seasons. So they use this quite liberally as a close quarters weapon with one hand especially, but with the balance in the center, it's very hard to swing. This is why when you're using a hammer or a mace or a sword, you need some more weight on the front end. That way you can swing properly. When all the weight is based on the grip, it's just really hard to control, and that's one of the immediate problems with a bow in hand-to-hand combat. The second problem is the length. Now, the Samick Sage is a 62-inch bow. It's not a long bow, it's an average size bow for a hunting bow. And most of the bows used in the shows are about the same length. The problem is that if you're using this as a one-handed weapon, having this extra half limits your range of motion. So if you're trying to swing across like this, you will hit yourself here. And if you come this way, well, you have to clear your torso. So it's clumsy because you have to work around this problem. And considering the nature of close quarters combat, where you want those directional attacks, this can be quite hard to work with. Third problem, the string's in the way. It stops you from doing a lot of motion. So again, if the limb doesn't hit you, the string will. And that is not a very effective technique. If you're trying to change hands or rotate the bow or turn it around, this string stops you. It just limits you from holding it like this, or you have to spin all the way around, hold it like this. And if this wasn't in the way, you could do so much more with the bow as a weapon, but that's also a limitation. So with those limitations in mind, can we make this work? I don't want to say it's a crappy weapon without actually trying it. So let's try some techniques in various grips and stances to see if the bow could be used as a melee weapon. First, we'll try to use the bow in our offhand. This is what most of the combat scenes start with, and likely if you're shooting and you have to use this to defend yourself, it'll be in your offhand. You might have an arrow here which you'll drop, but you're trying to use this to defend yourself. So what can you do with the bow in your offhand? Obvious one, can you punch with it? You're holding the grip here. You could, I guess, punch or strike someone with your hand or with the bow grip. So we'll try that. So, you know, we've been caught off here. Like a jab. I mean, you could throw a jab. It's kind of clumsy. And again, what makes this more awkward is that you have the string in the way. That's what stopped me from getting full range of motion. So you could do it, but it doesn't seem very effective. You're like, you might think that extra mass might add more weight to the punch, but it really does. It just slows you down. It's like wearing heavy gloves. It doesn't hurt. And the other problem I see is that you're probably going to make contact with these knuckles. That's going to hurt like heck for you. You really want to punch kind of close to here, whereas this one is like the way you grip the bow, you're going to smack this. That's going to break your own fingers, so I don't think a punch is very effective. You might argue that, hey, arrow has like a metal guard here. Well, that's a metal guard, that's different. But, you know, as a punching technique, I don't think a punch is going to be very effective. So, yeah, let's strike that one out. So if you can't punch, you can swing the bow. So we'll try some one-handed swinging from our normal position. So we'll try some basic directional attack. So across the body. That's not working very well. Alright, so we'll try it across the other way. Okay, that's a bit better. I generate some velocity with that. Tell you what, my hand's hurting. I'm trying to hold on to this because the balance is so wrong. It's actually putting a lot of pressure on my hand, so I'm trying to hold the thing in place. I have no control of the swing otherwise. And you can see I have a problem with the alignment. So if I'm trying to smack people with this side of the limb, then I'm trying to angle it right, but the bow always wants to turn. Again, partly because the string is in the way, the shape of the grip doesn't really suit what you're trying to do. So it always turns in the wrong direction. So I'm having problems getting a good swing. It looks okay on camera, by the way, but I don't think this is an effective technique. I mean, the reach is really low. It's not as long as you think. I've had someone mention a leg sweep, so we'll try that. We'll try a one-hand leg sweep, so try and go for the back of the kneecap. I don't think this works. When this other guy tried it on me, he used a much lighter bow. I mean, the Samick Sage is a little heavy in the middle, but most of the action bows are, so that's kind of what you expect. You really need a lighter bow to make better use of this. So I don't think the sweep is very good. It comes really slowly. It's not fast enough to connect with. I don't feel I have enough energy. If I was hit by that, I wouldn't really feel it. Kind of like, oh, that kind of annoyed me. It wouldn't really affect me. So I don't feel a one-handed grip here really helps. From the side, down low, as a sweep attack, there's not much you can really do with this. And again, just the length makes you have to kind of go this way or that way. You can't go straight down. It really limits what you do. So yeah, one-handed, I don't think this is very effective. Now, one of the classics, I guess, would be this swing. When you come across the bottom limb, you smack the bad guy on the head. Is that viable? Well, actually, if you do enough of the swing, it's kind of a left hook, so you could actually get some power in it. This might be the most powerful move I can do with a one-handed grip, but I feel so vulnerable at the end. Like, you swing, and your follow-through is just way too exaggerated. I don't think it'll work. This would work in prop combat where you have choreography and using really light gear, but as an actual combat technique, I don't think this works. This is the most powerful strike you can pull off, and even then, it's just, I don't think it works. Now, in a lot of the action scenes, we see the hero transition to a two-handed grip. Now that changes things quite a bit because, as I just demonstrated, one-handed swinging really doesn't generate anywhere near enough power to do any sort of damage. But a two-handed grip, now that gives you a lot more leverage because, as we said before, the bow is effectively a staff. A very strange staff now that's fully strung up, but it can be swung two-handed with much more control. So does this make it any better? So let's try some basic cut. Let's go down this way. Now I find that if I hold the limb round and the riser, I get a bit more control. So you can see some whiff there. So this could actually knock someone, possibly. All right, let's try a lateral cut. Oops, hit myself there. You can see the problem with the bottom limb. All right, so that's some power. Let's go across the other way. A little more awkward, that's not going to work too well. So this direction is most going to be down this way or across. Let's try swing the other way. Let's go. So I'll change my grip to kind of be a little higher up. Like leg sweep. I don't think so. How about up high? Not as effective. I don't know. Let's try to step through. I'm not sure about this, to be honest. This looks really dumb. Switch hands. Got some power there. Still not sure about this one. Cross, down, cross. Again, the clumsy thing is the string's in the way. Like, even if I could be a little fancier by dancing around and doing all these dances and blocks and parries, the string stops me from moving it freely. I'm not sure this is viable. You can hear some of that whiff, but how much damage it would do, I'm really not sure. The weight just doesn't seem right for this sort of weapon. You can't really have to really hold it really low to smack someone. And it's tiring, I'll tell you that. But not very effective. Can you block and parry? Yes, you could. You could, high guard. You could parry something aside. So I guess you could knock things. Someone kind of lunge at you with a blade or another bow. You could knock it aside. You could block it. You can come down. But it's the controllers. You don't really have the same control with a bow as you would a sword or anything else. So I'm not sure how viable it is. You could go through the motions. Let's put it that way. You can go through the motions of an attack, but whether this actually connects, I'm not sure about. So, yeah, I'm giving this one a thumbs down. I don't think, even with two hands, you can generate enough impact or force. Now, another reason why I think this is not a very effective fighting style is that even in the TV shows like Arrow, the way they swing their bow is very slow and clumsy. Now, I understand that when filming a fight scene, they don't fight in real time. They go through a slow motion fight choreography. So they'll go, go slow motion, slow motion, slow motion, slow motion. And in slow motion, a lot of these techniques look quite effective. Even one-handed, you actually pull some really cool things off. So there is some cool fact. I'm just swinging around without any method, but you could do some really cool things in slow motion, and then you speed it up on camera. So the actual fighting is slow, but when the scene's played on screen, it's sped up, so it looks like a real fight scene. But even then, you can tell sometimes that the swinging around, it looks kind of okay, but there's just simply no impact in a combat situation. So yeah, I still think, despite it kind of feeling a little flowy after a bit of practice, no, I don't think it works. Part of the problem, I think, is that the contact surface is the wrong way. I mean, you expect for a straight staff that the contact surface would be on this plane, but it's actually down here. So you would normally swing here, and that's where it would hit you, or the camera will actually hit you there. That's a pretty solid strike. But I'm actually that far out from you, so yeah, it's not intuitive to strike with this weapon. You have to really overswing to make contact, and you're cutting your range short. So yes, it's a lot harder than it looks. I just don't think, even with two hands, this thing has an intuitive way of fighting that can actually make it work in combat. So if my main complaint is the string being in the way, the length of the limbs, and the fact the limbs curve away from the target, then what if I reverse it? Now you might think, well, this kind of looks like a Bartlett from Star Trek. Just remember that a Bartlett is a sword, there are lots of pointy edges, and that has been proven to be a viable weapon, I believe. So this is definitely not one of those. You can't actually grapple and duel and bind with one of these. But interestingly, switching the grip around, so from this to this and holding it like this, actually has a much better feel. This could work. So let's try some strikes with this. Alright, I want to generate enough power so you can actually hear it. That's not bad. Alright, we'll try it other way. It's a bit easier coming across the body. Coming down, you could use the bottom grip to lever it a bit more, so you're pulling it downwards. Not dissimilar to a regular sword cut. This could actually work. Other side. And because the contact surface is where I think it should be, if it was a bit more intuitive to use it like this, this could actually be viable. And with a bit of practice, you could develop some fluidity in your technique. So you could guard it with it to an extent, you could parry, knock things aside, you can change grip here, come back this way, change back your grip, strike, you can thrust, strike, come back down, come back across, guard, check. It does make, it's kind of a hybrid between a sword and a club, so you could actually viably control this to some extent. I mean, it takes some practice. I've had like 15 minutes, so I haven't come up with a new sensei bow-jutsu method yet. But you could in some ways use this as a striking weapon, and I guess the more confident you are, the more control you have over your technique. So you could viably use this in a melee capacity if you really had to. An immediate problem is that, well, if your bow is strung, then your string will be cut pretty easily, I reckon. So that will end the use of a bow as a ranged weapon, though arguably it might make it a better melee weapon. So coming from this, if I really had to use the bow strung up as a melee weapon, I would probably use it in reverse grip like this, because you have so much more control over the weight and balance of the bow. You can be far more aggressive rather than trying to swing this around and missing because the limbs are the wrong way. I mean, it looks good on TV because the curvature, like whoosh, it looks like a nice stroke, but there's no power behind this. You have no control over this. You don't really hit very well. You turn it around and you can suddenly be a lot more aggressive. You can really batter someone like an axe. You can really bring your lower hand to come in and give it more power. I feel this is a lot scarier. If someone approaches you, I mean, it's not very scary, but somebody actually go up to you and they kind of smack you with this, that's actually a lot scarier. You can see, even on camera, that's a lot more aggressive, a lot crazier. I mean, a crazy guy with a bow closing a melee, I guess this works a lot better. This reverse grip feels a lot easier. Again, it depends on the actual model you use. Some bows are balanced differently, but I think with a typical hunting bow like the Sage, this grip has a lot more power and aggression. I think this works a bit better. On a side note, just because we're focused on bows doesn't mean we can't talk about accessories. And stabilizers are probably the best weapon or best improvised weapon in your kit. The way they're designed is exactly what a weapon should have. And the reason why these work is because they have a lot of weight on the end, so you can use this as a club. It makes a lot more sense to strike with this weapon. It's the right length, by the way, so you can use it as a staff or a short rod. You can strike with it. You probably don't want to guard with it because it's very slippery, it doesn't bind very well, so you probably end up hitting your fingers. But this could be used as a short sword. You can guard, you can check, you can swing it two-handed, so it does work to some extent. Now, that does depend on how much weight's on the end. It's a very light stabilizer rod, and it doesn't handle impact very well, so you find that this will crack. Again, depends on how well built it is. It's obviously not made to withstand impact, but you probably will crack the rod if you use it like this. But that can be a viable weapon if you had to clobber something or someone. Side rods could work. These aren't as long as conventional fighting sticks. These are only 10 inches. Typical side rod might be 12 inches. So they're on the short side, but they do have weight on the end, so you can actually do some good battering. Actually, this could hurt. It's metal, and with the weight in the end, you actually generate a lot of impetus. So you could actually do some light damage if you smack someone hard enough. Depends on your weight. I guess if you have a lot more weight stacked on, it could hurt a lot more. But yeah, this is controllable. It's more like a drumstick rather than a fighting stick, but you could use it as a weapon if you really had to. I guess you could choke someone with your bowstringer. As far as improvised archery weapons goes, I think the best choice would be the riser. I think a lot of people will agree as well. The riser is where most of the weight is, and it's designed to be well balanced. Also consider that most modern risers are made from metal, or at least carbon, but even the aluminium ones are very durable. These can definitely be used to clobber someone. I mean, these weigh around a kilogram or more, depending on the design and model, but you can definitely strike with it one-handed. You can use two hands and really bash someone with it. So if you had to face, I don't know, a giant spider, then this would be a great clubbing tool. So yeah, I think the riser is probably the most effective weapon. It might not be the most practical. I think the stabilizers are a bit better, but because you want to actually damage something, this actually will hurt a lot more than being struck by a whole bow with a limb at the end. I guess the downside of the riser is that, well, being the most expensive part of your bow, you probably don't want to damage it. On the plus side, you could hold the riser like this, unscrew the stabilizer, and then end them rightly. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this utterly ridiculous video. This is New Sensei, thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.